Hello and welcome to another Cheeky Scientist radio show podcast. I'm your host, Isaiah Henkel with Cheeky Scientist, and today we are interviewing Ryan Flaherty on careers as a patent agent. I've seen so many PhDs in our association get hired into patent agent roles. It's a great position. If you have a PhD, you'll definitely want to listen to this show. As always, if you want to learn more about our Cheeky Scientist Association, which is a PhD-specific job search blueprint for PhDs who want to get hired in industry, as well as a PhD-only job referral network, the largest job referral network of its kind, go to phdsgethired.com. If you go to phdsgethired.com, you'll learn all about the Cheeky Scientist Association. Just make sure to enter your name and email address. If you want to have our podcast as well as our free articles delivered to your email inbox weekly, just go to cheekyscientist.com. You can also go to iTunes and subscribe directly to this podcast so that you receive these free podcasts weekly. So without further ado, we're going to jump in here with Ryan Flaherty on careers as a patent agent. And with us, we have Ryan Flaherty. Dr. Ryan Flaherty is a registered patent agent with his firm, Price Hanneveld. Am I saying that right?
Yep, Price Hanneveld.
So thanks again for being with us, Ryan. Looking forward to having you here. Before Ryan joined Price Hanneveld, Ryan earned his BS in chemistry and from Grand Valley State University, and both a PhD in chemistry and an MS in patent law from the University of Notre Dame. School maybe you've heard of. As a PhD candidate, he conducted research using capillary electrophoresis with laser-induced fluorescence and mass spectrometry detection. His research brought together aspects of chemistry, biology, and engineering. He developed instrumentation for the advancement of analytical chemistry as it pertains to biological systems. So very similar background to some of you that we have on right now. While at Notre Dame, he published 4 peer-reviewed articles. 3 of those articles describe novel technologies that are the subject of patent applications. Makes sense. Additionally, 2 of the developed technologies have attracted commercial interest and have resulted in licensing agreements. Well done. At Notre Dame, how do you say it? Notre Dame or
Notre Dame? That's how I say it, Notre Dame. Perhaps some people say Notre Dame, but I would assume over in France, Notre Dame, and over here we can
say Notre Dame. Okay. Yeah. Just wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. At Notre Dame, Ryan was the inaugural chair of 2 committees, the Joint Analytical Sciences meeting and the Student Selected Speaker Committee. Before pursuing his graduate degrees, Ryan gained valuable laboratory experience during his internships with industrial companies Amway in Michigan and Cayman Chemical Company also in Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan. His undergraduate research and internship experiences utilize chromatographic and electrophoretic separation techniques to develop methods for analyzing complex mixtures. A native of Metro Detroit, he is passionate about the automotive industry, and this passion has manifested itself in his work on a 1964 Mustang. Nice. And an LS1 engine transplant into a 1994 Firebird, and a 1/4 mile drag racing at Milan Dragway in Southeast Michigan. Very cool. Hey, I love when you get to hear a little bit about the non-science, although I guess it's science, but the hobbies too. So good lesson for all of you who are on. Always include something that personalizes you, right? Something that shows a different side of you, whether it's on your resume or LinkedIn profile or a bio for a webinar. So great to have you with us, Ryan. Thanks for taking the time to be here and to share your knowledge with everybody here.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so the first question we always like to ask, it will come as no surprise to you or those of you listening, is how did you transition? So what did the transition process look like? And before that, even, why did you decide to transition? Why not just stay in academia if things were going so well and your work was leading to patents?
Sure. So it's kind of a long story. The abridged version is basically, I've been interested in patent law for quite a while. I actually thought after college I'd go to law school to become a patent attorney. But then I got into the lab doing undergrad research and absolutely loved it. So I wanted to go to grad school because I felt like I wanted to know more about chemistry in general. And so as I'm working through that, I'm realizing that the lab probably isn't where I ultimately want to be. I got kind of fatigued for working on something for an extended period of time without necessarily making any progress towards answering a question or towards the ultimate goal. There was one time in grad school, I think I worked on something for 6 to 8 months to come to find out that that whole time, one of the pieces of equipment was slowly failing. So that was demoralizing, to say the least. And then I heard about the Masters of Science in Patent Law program that Notre Dame was offering. Unfortunately, it's no longer offered, but maybe it'll get reinstated at some point later on down the road. I think there's a few other universities around the country that are doing things that are similar, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So ultimately, it seemed like too good of an opportunity to pass up. Had been interested for a while in patent law, was getting kind of fatigued of working in the lab, and then had the opportunity to get that extra credential to try to differentiate myself from the pack when looking for a job. And here I am.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks. It's important to, I think, talk about the why. What is that motivation? And the takeaway that I heard is you wanted to branch out a little bit instead of just doing the experiments. You wanted to go a little bit beyond. You wanted to see it translate, and then having that experience with a faulty instrument can be tough years of work sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
So that makes sense. I'm guessing a lot of you are experiencing similar feelings, reasons why you're pursuing an industry career. So I want to move from the why to the how. So you mentioned how you got interested in patent law, but how did you actually start to pursue it? What are some of the very first steps that you took?
Sure. One of the very first steps I took was to kind of start talking to people who are in the field, which, this webinar is great for that. That's one of the reasons I was more than happy to participate in it. It's a tough decision to try to transition out of what people will typically call the traditional career path. However, I would definitely say staying in academia is more of a non-traditional career path from a percentage standpoint. There's just not that many professorships that are opening up for people. And, a lot of people I think are in a similar situation that I am. So the first steps were finding out about the field a little bit more in depth, and then pursuing that patent law degree, which, like I said, that's a pretty unique opportunity that I was able to take advantage of. But for the general population, I'd say if you're interested in it, especially if you're still in college or at a grad school or generally working at or near a university, try to reach out to some of the tech transfer people, start getting your toes wet a little bit in what patent law is, how it works, that kind of thing. Because one of the big questions is going to be, okay, are you going to like it? It's going to be something you've never done before. So yeah, talking to people and then trying to find out more about it. The biggest hurdle to try to overcome, besides actually getting that first job in this field, is becoming a registered patent agent or patent attorney. And that you do by studying for and passing the patent office's patent bar, which is very difficult. Most people fail it their first time. I have no qualms about telling people that I did. I thought, I'd had no problem with tests leading up till that point, and it's a pass-fail that you need 70% on to pass. And so more than half of the people, last I checked, don't pass it, and I missed passing it by 4 questions.
More than half fail the first time?
Yeah, more than half.
This is national or by state?
National. That's the other nice thing about being a patent agent is once you pass the patent bar, you've got that credential as long as you don't do something unethical that they take it away for, and it's nationwide. Whereas patent attorneys, they're able to practice before the patent office nationally as well, but then to practice as an attorney in the individual states, they have to pass those bars. So a little bit different process for the two.
So just to kind of recap, you started by learning more about what patent law was. You started reaching out to people and talking to them, essentially setting up informational interviews, networking to learn more about it. And then you went through the process and you took the exam. Now, where exactly, can you break down the process more? Like, did you have to take the exam first before you started applying to jobs? Or, how can somebody who says, I want to get into patent law right now, I want to take this exam, what are the first steps?
Sure. So you don't have to take the exam to get into this field. It's one of the ways to help differentiate yourself, though. If you don't have the bar registration with the patent office, you're called usually one of two things: a technical specialist or a patent engineer. Even if your degree is not in engineering, it's just what they call them. There might be some other titles that firms or companies call them, but those are the two most common. And so you can do everything, you can basically do the legwork, but then you're reporting to a patent agent or a patent attorney who signs off on the work because you're not registered to represent clients before the patent office. But that doesn't mean you can't be, the specialist that knows the technology and can kind of translate what the inventors have done into something that the patent law community can understand. So you can look for jobs. They're harder to come by doing that. Ultimately, passing that patent bar shows a little bit of skin in the game, because that's the biggest issue. Is most of the positions that you're going to come across are looking for somewhere between 2 and 5 years of experience. However, the only way to get that experience is for someone to take that first chance on you. So it's a little bit of a catch-22. Is they're looking for people to enter into the field, but they want them to basically already be trained and be up to speed.
Which is no different than, I mean, for those of you listening, it's no different than a situation, no matter what industry position you want to get into, essentially. But the difference here is that there seems to be a more recognized way to show an investment, at least in time, that you're serious about this career path, right? How long would you say it took you how much time and investment did it take you to study for the patent bar exam?
It was significant, and the prep courses are not cheap. So that's another kind of activation energy. The exam itself is expensive. I don't remember the exact cost, and it may have gone up since I've taken it. I know some of the prep courses have increased in price since I took it. I want to say you're looking at anywhere from $500 to $2,000 for a prep course. Some of the one that I did was covered by the tuition for the Master's in Science program, and so that one I think at the time was about $1,500, and I think it's up to $1,800 for a student access code now. Nice thing with that is they have a bunch of online questions that you can do. So I would say you definitely need to spend intense studying time, probably 2 months. And that course that I took, I think they said anyone who does 600 to 800, or maybe it was 800 questions, practice questions, they haven't had anyone fail that did that. So the first time I took it, I definitely didn't do that. The second time I took it, I wasn't joking around. I hadn't actually passed the patent bar when I came to this position, but I passed it about 6 months in, and that's about how long it took me to study and not be neglecting my time here at work too. So,
and so your official title is patent agent, right? So to be clear, if you don't take the exam, you're probably looking at more of entry-level jobs like technical specialist or patent engineer, like you said. And then you take the exam, you can get to patent agent. Now, for those of you listening, you're probably asking yourself, well, wait a second. We have had people on that have become a patent agent without taking that exam. You can do it, like Ryan said. You just have to, it might take longer, right? So you might start as a patent engineer and work your way up at a company, because you don't actually need to pass the exam to be an agent, do you?
You do. However, if you work as a patent examiner with the patent office, which is also a very good job, you're just on the other side of the table from the process of where I am. And I have the utmost respect for them. I just had an interview with one yesterday on an office action that we had gotten back from them. It's always really cordial. It doesn't have to be adversarial. It's not supposed to be. Some people approach it that way. But if you've worked for the patent office, if I remember right, for 5 years, you can waive into the patent bar, where you basically say, hey, I've been doing this for 5 years for you guys. And that seems to be their cutoff, where they say, yeah, you know this well enough.
So if you're so you can work your way up to a patent examiner without taking the exam.
You can start as a patent examiner. So the patent office, there's the two sides of the table. I'm going to assume no one has a law degree that we're talking with. The entry for my side of it without the patent bar would be technical specialist and patent engineer, and that's where it stops. Without the patent bar registration, you can't set yourself out as a patent agent. I'm trying to remember the exact wording on the document that I've got, but once you have that, you can represent the clients. You can talk directly to the examiners. If you don't have the bar registration, or the examiners aren't supposed to talk to you. You have to have a patent attorney or a patent agent in the room at the same time to discuss things. If you're on the other side of things, you don't need a patent bar registration to become a patent examiner. They train you on the job. They have a couple of satellite offices. The two that I'm aware of are Detroit and Denver, in addition to their one over in the Washington, D.C. area. I think it's in Alexandria, if I remember right.
Okay.
And so once you've worked at the patent office, you can become a patent agent without the law degree or without taking that patent bar exam, as long as you have that minimum work experience, and you have to apply for that.
So you, as a patent examiner, you can become a patent agent with 5 years of experience.
Something like that. Yeah, I can't remember what the cutoff is. I think it's 5 years. They basically say, look, you understand the law well enough. You've been knee deep in this for 5 years. That's ultimately what the bar exam says, is you're being held accountable for knowing what you can and cannot do.
And describe the sides of the table you keep talking about, right? So you have the patent engineer, patent agent, the team on one side, the patent examiner on the other. You mentioned the government for the patent examiner side. Can you explain what you mean when you're talking about sides of the table?
Sure. The examiners, you can think of them as kind of gatekeepers. They're the ones not necessarily standing in your way of getting a patent on a technology that you've submitted an application for, but they're the ones that scrutinize whether you're entitled to as much as you think you are. So ultimately, I think the best way to discuss this is kind of talking about how the whole process starts. And so if it's all right, I'll just kind of answer it that way. It'll be a little bit of a lengthy answer, but so usually the first point of contact that we have on an innovation is we'll receive an invention disclosure from a client, whether that's a solo inventor that has done this on their own or if they're working for a company. So we get that invention disclosure, and we usually encourage people to do a prior art search just to see if anyone has done anything similar or exactly the same out there, so that we know kind of what we can start to carve out, because that tells us where to focus the application's description on. And so you've got the invention disclosure, you do the search, and those can be of varying depths. You know, we've got clients that just want us to look really quick to see if there's anything exactly like it out there. There's ones that want us to spend a little bit more time looking at further, in addition to patentability, seeing what they're entitled to, seeing if there's anyone out there that can actively stop them. Are there any active patents that would prevent them from being able to practice? And so once you've done the search, you report back to the client, say, hey, here's the search references. Based on what we found, here's what we believe would be available. And if you'd like to proceed, please let us know. We'll hold off until we hear back from you, basically. And if they still want to pursue based on the protection that we think they'd be entitled to, then they will open up a file for us to prepare a patent application. You spend some time writing that, you file it, and then a period of time passes. Right now, anywhere, usually about 18 months or so, is kind of the waiting period for the patent office. Not that they're just sitting on it, it's just they have so many things to get through, and it operates as a first in, first out kind of basis. So it just takes about 18 months to get to your turn in the queue. And then once the examiner picks it up, so then that's where we've got that two sides of the table. On our side of the table, we're representing the client. On the other side of the table, the patent examiner is looking at what we've submitted as our application. And then the very end of the application has what's called claims. And that's basically carving out what intellectual property we think we're entitled to for our client. And so usually you try to make that abut right up next to where the references that you had available in your search are. And then the examiner will do a search. They'll come back to you and say, hey, I see you think you're entitled to this amount of protection, but I don't think you're entitled to that much. And here's the references to support that opinion. And then they send that document to you. And that's where you have perhaps an on-phone interview that I did, for example, yesterday that I mentioned earlier, where you say, hey, I see what you're talking about. You know, these references are really good. Thank you for your scrutiny on it. We'll definitely amend the claims. Here's kind of what I'm thinking we could do to amend the claims to distinguish over these prior art references. And you kind of have that cordial back and forth of saying, you know, here's what I think we're entitled to. They say, oh, I see where you're coming from, but I think this would sound a little better. So you do that a couple of times, and then ultimately the final goal is to have an issued patent application. So you can think of the patent examiner being on representing the government in
No,
the
that's
agreement
perfect. Well, let me just
that,
jump in real quick. So with based on what you said, and that's a great insight into kind of the day to day, and we can't get more practical than that. So for those of you listening, hopefully that helps you understand what I mean the back and forth is, the different sides are, and the end goal is. Just to go back to what you said, though, so a patent examiner can switch sides of the table eventually if they have lots of experience. They can become a patent agent and go work for a company to
yeah,
represent clients. Okay.
and that's what a lot of them end up doing. It can be tough to get that 2 years of experience. I shouldn't say a lot of them, but I know of ones who have made that transition.
Okay, just curious.
Especially around the Washington, D.C. area. I think there's a lot of agents and attorneys in the D.C. area that were former examiners. We actually have one of the partners here as a former examiner.
Perfect. And that would be another option. We always like to talk about all options here, but for the most part, if you want to go right into that patent agent position, you are going to take the patent bar exam, and it's gonna be a significant investment in terms of time. It sounds like it's very similar to taking the MCAT or the LSAT kind of exam, right? In terms of you're going to be preparing for months, and you're going to be paying to take the exam too. And then once you take this, you probably, you might not pass the first time. You have to take it again. And then once you do pass, you're able to go into this position. So what happens after you pass? You get a passing certificate. What are the next steps? Is that when you can start applying for jobs, or is there a more formal process you have to go through?
Yeah, you can start applying for jobs at that point, or you can apply before then even. I would definitely recommend, if you're planning on pursuing it, putting on the resume or the submission document, whatever it ends up being, that you're actively pursuing the patent agent credential, and however you want to phrase that. I think that's how I had it on my resume, that, actively pursuing patent bar registration, tentative examination date of summer 2016, something like that. And, the patent agent exam, ultimately, that can't be taken away from you, like I said, unless you do something unethical that is against the rules and they decide to take that away from you. What it does is it shows the potential employers that you've got some skin in the game and that you've invested a significant amount of time and a decent chunk of money to try to take this exam, get this registration, and that'll help distinguish you from people who have not taken that exam.
Even if you put the fact that you are going to take it, or the date you're going to take it. Okay, so let's break down the process a little bit more. So then you submit your application or your submission form, and then what usually happens? Is it similar to other types of transitions or onboarding processes, or interviewing processes? Do you get a phone screen first, and then you go for a site visit, or what happened for you specifically after you passed the exam and got hired?
Sure. So I passed the exam after getting hired, but I had a unique experience with it as far as the application process. I had submitted several applications. I actually was a little bit, I don't know if brazen is the right term, but I was applying for even patent attorney jobs that had 0 to 2 years of experience, because I figured, hey, look, you're looking for someone to be able to do this work, and I'm planning on taking the patent bar exam, so I'll apply. Not surprisingly, I never heard back from any of those. I did apply for technical specialists, patent engineers, and patent agent jobs, but I never actually heard back on anything that I had applied for. I applied to tech transfer offices at universities. One of the problems was I was trying to apply a little bit too soon. Usually those job positions, they're looking for someone, they need them now. They're not looking for someone in 12 to 18 months, kind of thing. So that's the other tough part. I was finishing grad school, and we had our son on the way. So it was kind of like, I need to find somewhere that I can at least get a paycheck. So ultimately I lucked out and I got contacted twice. One was a firm that it was a little too early to. It ended up being another 12 to 18 months before I ended up actually graduating. So didn't get an offer from them, but they did a phone screening first to ask some questions to see if it'd be a good fit. And then they brought me in for an on-site interview. I thought the interview went reasonably well, but they had some concerns with commuting. I was going to be commuting from northern Indiana, where Notre Dame is, to Grand Rapids on a daily basis. And they saw, with the winter coming up, that was
Good luck.
yeah. I ultimately ended up doing that anyway for this position that I got, because I finished a few months before my wife did. She was getting her graduate degree at Notre Dame as well. But both of those positions, an attorney at the firm had come across my bio on the Masters in Patent Law website and contacted me because of my ties to the Grand Rapids area, because that's one of the things that goes into attrition for employees. If you're not close to your friends and family, it's going to be tough to keep people around long term. So,
well, can I ask? I want to rewind to this interview. So besides asking questions about friends and family and the commute, what was there any sort of hard hitting questions that they asked, or were there technical questions versus more of the soft skills, the transferable questions? Do any stick out in your mind?
Sure. Yeah. They definitely wanted to know kind of what my plans were. Why did you want to get into patent law, and why the Grand Rapids area kind of thing. Ultimately, my view, and I've been on the interviewing side of the table now several times. We've brought, I think, a handful of people on since I started about 2 years ago. So we're growing, but the thing I'm always looking for, if you're sitting, and I want people to hear this too, if you're sitting on the other side of a table, they've looked at your resume, they assume that you're going to be able to do the job. What I'm usually looking for is, are you going to be a good fit for our clients? Are you going to be a good fit for the culture that we're trying to maintain at the firm? I'm going to be helping train you probably, because we always ask the people that have started most recently, hey, how do you do this thing? Because they've been in your shoes most recently. So another question is, do I want to spend significant amount of my free time at work helping this person out, kind of thing? And that's not from just a personality standpoint, but it's just, recognize that if you're there, it's the interpersonal skills that are probably getting interviewed. So when I was in those interviews, they did ask some of the hard-hitting questions of, okay, well, why patent law? Have you had any exposure? Have you written any applications? Have you done any of these things? And then those were a little bit more sparse. Some of the people hadn't even looked at the resume. They were just kind of scanning down through. And actually, one of the big reasons they hired me here, they told me after the fact, was the fact that I had worked on cars. One of our biggest clients is one of the automotive manufacturers here in the U.S.
Okay, so wait, because this is all just incredible, perfectly aligned with everything that we teach in our program. So hopefully, for those of you listening, you're getting the same takeaways that I am. So number one, you're going to get those behavioral questions that always start with why, right? For a PhD, why do you want to get into patent law? Why do you want to work for us, right? All these questions, why do you want to leave academia? These kind of things. So you heard that from Ryan. They're very likely not going to read your resume until they're sitting across from you in an interview. I mean, and now that you've been on the other side of the table, Ryan, right? They might be the day of or the week of. Hey, we have some people coming in for an interview. Like, here's their resume, and you look at it when you're sitting across from them. At least most people do. I think that's really, really important to recognize. This takes us to the end of this Cheeky Scientist radio podcast episode that you have been listening to. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please go to iTunes and leave a review and let us know what you would like to hear more of. If you're interested in transitioning into industry, go to phdsgethired.com and enter your name and email address, and we will give you information about our PhD job search blueprint, specifically for PhDs who want to transition into industry, as well as our PhD-only 4,000 plus member private job referral network. Again, go to phdsgethired.com and enter your name and email address now. As always, remember your value as a PhD and start thinking and acting like a successful industry professional.